Good afternoon. Today I've been asked to speak on God's parenting manual. Today is also Mother's Day. The Bible says we should rejoice today, not because it is Mother's Day, but because this is the day the Lord has made. And that's the reason we rejoice and be glad in it. But because it's Mother's Day, we have a double reason for rejoicing. On Mother's Day, do you think they get more flowers than lovers get on Valentine's Day? Based on pre-COVID data, the US stories tell us, going by sales, more money is spent on flowers for mothers on Mother's Day than for lovers on Valentine's Day. So if this were a soccer match, it's 1-0 to mothers. How about mothers? Do you think they get more love than fathers? Based on sales for mothers on Mother's Day and sales for fathers on Father's Day, mothers get more love. At least 84% celebrate compared to 76% for fathers. And by sales receipts, mothers win again. 2-0 to mothers. Hooray! Mothers are doing very well. Why does the world love Mother's Day so much? There's a festive air, sales are up, restaurants are packed, everyone is happy. But what exactly are we celebrating today? Is it all mothers? Is it about motherhood? Or is it about individual mothers? If you say it's Mother's Day, S', you're referring to all mothers. And you have to buy a lot of presents. But if it's Mother's Day without any apostrophe, you're referring to motherhood in general. Today we are talking about Mother's Day with an apostrophe S. This is a day that was started by a lady called Anna Jarvis in 1908. So chronologically, today should be Grandmother's Day because she is 115 years old. Thank goodness no one goes around saying, Happy Granny's Day. The scripture reader read for us 3 passages. One of them is from Proverbs 31. It describes the perfect wife, or in Hebrew, Eshet Hayil. More literally translated as the virtuous wife. Why is she the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect stewardess of home, and the perfect ambassador? Because she can do all these things. I'm not trying to put the mothers on a guilt trip. So I assure you, we are not talking about Proverbs 31 today. So mothers can relax. Neither will I be speaking on the Old Testament saints. Saints like Sarah, Liew, Rachel, or even Mary, the mother of Jesus, whom the early church called the Theotokos, which is the guardian of God. Neither will I speak about the only commandment with a promise. That's from Ephesians 6, as well as from Exodus 20. Then why have all 3 passages read? It is so that we will have a framework to connect the relationships between children and their mothers, and children and their mothers to God. Without these 3 passages, we'll be only looking at from a one-sided passage. But today, just for today, we're only talking about the parenting manual for mothers. So which passage will I be using? In Hebrew, it's written like this. This is the manual. If you've never read Hebrew, it's read from right to left, not left to right. So it sounds like this. Okay? First line. Yevreha Adonai Verish Mereha. Yara Adonai Panav Eleha Vihuneha. In the third line, Isa Adonai Panav Eleha Vyasem Shalom. You're probably more familiar with the English version. The Lord bless ye and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his face or his countenance upon you and give you his peace. This is called the Aaronic blessing. From Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 30. What's the structure of the Aaronic blessing? Why is it considered beautiful, symmetrical, or perfect in construction? If you count the number of words in the first line, it's 3 followed by 5 and 7. If you count the number of syllables, the word syllable has 3 syllables, syllable. Okay? It starts with 12, 14, and 16. If you count the letters of the consonants, it starts with 15, 20, 25. Those of you who study English literature will appreciate the structure. And the climax is not just an increase in number of lines and number of words and consonants and syllables, but it culminates in the word shalom in blue for you. It's not just the absence of strife or conflict, not just peace, but a flourishing. And fourthly, if you subtract from this blessing, the Hebrew words at least, the words in red, which is the word for the Lord. From 15 words, you subtract 3, you get 12. Representing 1 word each for each tribe of Israel. Therefore, it's called artistically, aesthetically, and symmetrically beautiful. Why is it necessary to tell you it's beautiful? Because few people who come to church think of worshiping the Lord for his beauty. Psalm 27 has to remind us where the psalmist says, one thing I've asked of the Lord. He does not ask for 2 things, just one thing. And he goes on to say that I may dwell in the house a lot, but for what purpose? What is that one thing? And the first thing he mentions is to behold the beauty of the Lord. When we come to worship and forget the Lord is beautiful, and we only come to hear a sermon hoping to find something useful, we turn God into a God that is useful and is just a God with benefits. Because he is beautiful, his blessings are beautiful. They also sound beautiful. But who is blessing whom in this blessing? It's called the Lord, all spelled in caps, L-O-R-D. But who is the Lord? Is he the Lord spelled with like this, or is he God? The text says no. It is the Hebrew word, the Lord. In Hebrew, it comprises 4 letters, written from right to left. Technically, it's Yud, He, Vav, He, called the Tetragrammaton. And nobody since the 3rd century knows how to pronounce it. So, this name appears in the prayer books in the synagogues, and the Jews will read Adonai, meaning my Lord. And the pious or Hasidic Jews will replace the name with Hashem, which means the name. The name. In English Bibles, it's translated as YHWH, or sometimes capital L, capital O, capital R, and capital D. What is the purpose of showing you this slide? For the purpose of the parenting manual, you must know that the Lord's name appears 3 times to tell you it is the Lord who is blessing you. Not the preacher, not the bishop, but the Lord. And how do you know it's you? Because you appears 6 times. So it's clearly you who will receive the blessing. How do we know who the Lord is? Every name has a meaning. And Patrick, okay, name means of noble ancestry. So what does the name L-O-R-D mean? It's derived from a Hebrew word, okay, which has 3 tenses. It means to be. In the past tense, it's called in Hebrew Hayah, present tense Hoveh, and in future tense Yeh. And so the Lord's name is an amalgamation of 3 tenses, meaning He's not only exists in the past, He not only exists in the present, but He also exists in the future, and this is the catch. He exists simultaneously in 3 tenses. How is it derived? How do you amalgamate He was, He is, and He will be? I'm not making this up. That's how the Lord declares His name in Exodus chapter 3. I am who I am. He is who He will be. When we merge it, the Hebrew letters, what happens when you merge the first 2, the past with the present? Artistically or graphically, you get this word. What happens if you merge all 3 names or 3 tenses together? You get this, which is a result of merging all the tenses in the red oval, in the white oval, and that's the name of the Lord, all spelled in caps. The Lord is therefore timeless. And why did I show you this slide? Because He's timeless. His blessing is timeless. And this parenting manual I'm to introduce to you is also timeless. One blessing from the Lord is the gift of children. But if children are a blessing, why is the birth rate in the indigenous Singaporean population dropping? Why are so many Christian couples who can have children not having any? The title of this slide says, Hine Nahala Adonai Banim, which means children are a heritage from the Lord. They are a gift, they are a reward. Happy is the man whose quiver is full of them. They are a heritage and not a complex economic good. By the way, how do you know it's God who wants children? And why would He want children? Because Malachi 2:15 tells us, He made you, Mr. Husband, to be one with your wife so that God can have godly offspring. There's no better way. God wants to change you inside out. Change your character through marriage and through having children. That's the best way of having your rough edges shorn off. Nothing like a child who keeps you awake all night to teach you what patience and loving care means. And all young mothers, I can see nod their head because they have been co-sufferers, even with old fathers and mothers. So to all who are married and able to have children, I make a plea. Have one for mommy, one for daddy, and one for country. And if you can go on a sabbatical, have one more for the church. But rewarding as children are, they come with challenges. And parenting can be challenging. You worry when they're babies whether they will eat the greens. Maybe some will not sleep through the night. Some will wet their pants. Some refuse to eat vegetables. Some turn aggressive or antisocial. And when you discipline them, will they react violently? Will they have good study habits? Will they date correctly? Will they experiment with drugs, alcohol, porn, or even sex? My goodness. So how does the Aaronic blessing help us as parents? For today, I will refer to the first line of the blessing as verse 1. So verse 24 of Numbers chapter 6 becomes verse 1. And the second verse, 25, becomes verse 2, and verse 26 becomes verse 3. 1, 2, 3. It's easier to refer. Or if you like colors, as the green verse, the orange verse, and the purple verse, like the MRT colored lines. Okay? Let's start by asking, is each verse the same as the other? It seems to be talking about blessing, blessing, blessing. Is God being repetitious? Or in Cantonese, they say Chiong Hei. Or are they saying three different things? If they're saying three different things, why does the word face appear only in the last two verses and is missing in the first? Is there a progression, and how are they connected? Let's do this step by step. In the first verse, the first verb is bless. Bless. In Hebrew, it's called yevarek. It's a pure justice third person singular verb. You don't understand Hebrew? I only say it for those who are technically minded, so that you know it's an intensive imploring by the priest. It's as if the priest is commanding the Lord to bless you. How do we know? It's imperative because it's a justice. How do you know he's doing it intensively? Because it's a PL. But you don't need to know anything except the Lord is serious about blessing you. What's key is knowing the meaning of bless. There's a range of meanings for the word bless, but the context makes it clear that it refers to its use, for example, in Deuteronomy 7:13, where the Lord says, He will bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, meaning He will bless and give you many children. He will give fertility to your land and to your animals. And bless, therefore, has this idea of multiplying. Multiplying. How do I explain this? Well, let me take you to the city of Pompeii. You find graffiti everywhere, in every city, even in ancient cities. And someone found this graffiti dating back to AD 79 with these words. This is now changing from Hebrew to Greek. It's read now from left to right. Philo es arithmos pheme, ikong simi. It means I love her whose number is 545. How can you call someone 545? How unromantic. This is the practice called gematria, where you try and give a value to each letter of the alphabet. So the first letter of the alphabet gets number 1. The second letter of the alphabet gets number 2, and so on. And you add up these Greek letters, you end up with 545. I love her whose name is 545. Don't try that with your girlfriend or your wife. Okay? In Hebrew, the word for blessed is barak, shown in white on this slide. Again, using the principle of gematria, where you add the first, give the letter, the number 1 to the first letter, and number 2 to the second letter, and so on and so forth. What does this word bless add up to numerically? To 220. There's a doubling, not only in tens, but in hundreds. And in this context, because you're talking about parenting, when you ask the Lord to bless you, it must be that you are asking the Lord to give you a child. And when you pray this prayer, I pray your tribe may increase like this. 17 children from the same father and the same mother. Now I can see all the women groaning, moaning, and squirming in their seats. Where are the tax incentives? Who will change the diapers, right? But you get the idea. As a parent, what is involved in blessing your child? You bless your child in ways which multiply their strength. You build them up in ways that can increase their intellectual strength, and that's through education. Or physical strength through exercise and outdoor activities. Moral strength by showing them the ancient past, so they know right from wrong. Social strength by teaching them to socialize, learning to play with others so they know how to keep relationships healthy and how to avoid unhealthy ones. Then you teach them also emotional intelligence. Build up the resilience to cope with disappointments in life. They may suffer breakups, failures, but you want them to be educated, emotionally resilient, so they can bounce back. Teach them a skill so they can be useful adults when they grow up. That's the meaning of bless. And that's your fundamental obligation as a parent. But you can go into overdrive, planning even where to stay to get your children into a school of choice. And you can send them into overdrive, hothouse them, violin classes, ballet classes, and even drowning them with scuba diving lessons. Don't leave a child unhappy because they feel deprived of their childhood years. So bless is not the obligation in the first verse. There's another verb called keep. YHWH. Keep is like guard. When do you guard your kids? When do you watch over them like a hawk? When they play by themselves by the beach. I remember all my 3 sons, the first time they visited the beach, they wanted to eat sand. And many of you are nodding in agreement. Eh? Why do we watch? They might wander into the sea. And even in the shopping mall, they get lost. So you watch over them when they cross the road and they learn to ride a bike. Your fundamental obligation as a parent, the first verse says, watch over our children, bless them. That's not all. There are 2 more verses. What's required in the next 2 verses? A rabbi called David Foreman has suggested that 3 verses indicate different stages of parenting. We just finished stage 1. In other words, you can't get to stage 2 without accomplishing stage 1. And you can't get to stage 3 without accomplishing stage 2. So stage 1, okay, people say, your obligation to bless and guard them, when does it start? Does it start when they enter school? Does it start when they are born? It starts earlier. Because life begins at conception. Where's the proof of life in the womb? That's the ultrasound scan showing the baby alive and kicking the mother in the womb. But is there a biblical proof? In Liew 141, Mary visits her cousin Elizabeth, who is pregnant in the 5th month. And when she arrived, the baby, brephos, leapt in the womb. Eskiptesen is the Greek word to say it leapt. Why does the obligation to bless and guard your baby start in the womb? Because the womb is where the baby gets all its nutrients. That's why mothers who are expecting are not only expected, but must abstain from alcohol and smoking. Why? It leads to premature birth, low birth weight, and many babies are born with congenital heart defects, even cleft palates. So expectant mothers, stay away from alcohol, stay away from even side stream smoke. If blessing and guarding the baby starts in the womb, where do you find these 2 obligations springing from? Not from the medical doctor, but it's from the Hebrew word that's derived from the word womb, rahem, from which you derive the word rahamin, which means compassion. All mothers have compassion towards their children. That's why even when they cannot see the baby in the womb, they will do everything possible to create the most pristine environment for the child. They will sacrifice everything. You never hear of a mother saying, I pity you. Mothers don't show sympathy. They show compassion. So what's the difference between pity, sympathy, empathy, and compassion? A man has fallen into a ditch, so this drawing tells us. And the ditch metaphorically represents a calamity, a catastrophe. How do you respond? When you say, I see you are in the pit, that's pity. When you say, I care about your suffering, that's sympathy. When you say, I feel your pain, that's empathy. Mothers don't just feel empathy, they experience the passion. They experience the pain with you, and so they will relieve you. For this, we need to turn now to the next verse. The next verse is about shining light. How do you read this verse? The Hebrew verb shine is boxed in the red rectangle. Technically, it's called a Hiphil-Jussive verb. Why do I tell you it's a Hiphil verb? Because it says the shining of God's face has been caused. But it doesn't tell us whether God caused his own face to shine or you caused God's face to shine. When we translate this verse, traditionally it comes out as, may God shine his face upon you. We assume it is God who caused his own face to shine. So the traditional translation is, may God shine his face upon you. But it being a Hebrew word, you can also say, it is you who caused God's face to shine. And this is a reading of a famous rabbi called Rashi. Why are you the reason for God's face shining? Why does God beam with delight when he sees you? Because instead of saying, God shines on you, you say, the second reading says, you cause God's face to shine. It's like a mother cooing over a baby. Does God coo over us like a mother does over a baby? Zephaniah 3:17 tells us, the Lord does it too. He will take delight in you with gladness. With his love, he will calm your fears. He will rejoice over you with joyful songs. In the ESV, it says, he will exult over you with loud singing. You know, mothers are always delighted to see their babies. Sometimes they forget, or they think they will forget how their babies look like. How do you know? In case they forget how their babies look like, they put the baby's photograph on the default screen of their handphone. Oh, right? You see the mothers laughing. All of them do that. It took me a while to understand that. Fathers somehow don't do that. Fathers will put the wife's face. It's not that they forget how the wife looks like, but fathers should if they're not. Okay? So God is overjoyed. We should also. But there's a second verb in this second verse, and it's boxed in red for it. It's called vihuneha. Translated as, may God be gracious unto you. But it's a verb which means, may God grace you. What does grace mean as a verb? You know what it means as a noun? Well, what does it mean as a verb? As a noun, is this Hebrew word called Heng. I color in purple so that you can see grace embedded in the Hebrew verb. So when it says, when God grace you, you see the words in purple embedded on your left-hand side, second line. Okay? And to pardon is lahon, you also see grace embedded in it. And hinam is free, it's an adjective, which is why Christians say grace is God's riches at Christ's expense. And that tells us grace points us to unconditional love. Unconditional love is different from compassion, which is conditional because the womb stops looking after or stops nurturing the baby once it is stillborn. What powers grace is not the prospect of a return on investment. Whether my child will grow up to be rich and famous, but it is just love for love's sake. Unconditional love, when the mother coos over a baby, is really infatuation. So if compassion is one kind of love, that's conditional. Grace is a second kind of love, which is unconditional. Is there a third kind of love? Well, there is. The last verse, purple, is translated as, may the Lord lift up his face to you and grant you peace. Notice the word face appears in the last two verses, but not the first. Why is the word face missing in the first verse? Because the child in the womb cannot see your face, but can kick you here, right? Only after birth can you see the child see the face of a mother. But how does the mother face the child? It's always top down, right? Top down, until the child grows taller than the mother. Then the mother looks up. The third verse is, may the Lord lift up his face. Are we saying, therefore, that you've grown taller than God and he has to look up? Look up at you? No, what it means is God now begins to treat you as an adult. Some decisions a child makes when they grow up may not be to your liking. You can sulk and turn your face away from their gaze, and you keep them emotionally tethered to you. Or you can meet their eyes in a moment of love and pronounce shalom to them. After all, they are now adults, reconciled with their choices. As an aside, do you know why you need to rest from mothering your children once they become adults? Why is rest necessary? In Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3, it tells us when creation was finished, on the seventh day, God finished his work he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work he had done. Why did God rest on the seventh day? Is it he had finished his homework? Why did he keep on creating? Because as long as God was creating, his creation was not independent from him. Just as a painter, if he's painting roses, he doesn't stop painting. Tomorrow he can change to painting lilies. The act of creation must stop for the creation to be independent from the Creator. God's strategic act to stop creating on the seventh day was to grant the creation independence. In the same way, when your child grows up, you have to grant your child independence. Otherwise, your child will become an automaton. That's a bit like a Stepford spouse in disguise. So for an adult child, stop treating them like a little boy or little girl. They may be married. Give them space as they turn their attention towards their own families. There's a tendency to be grumpy when this happens. And the poem that summarizes this is so interesting, I decided to read to you at least the first stanza. It's called One Last Time. One last time. There will come a time when you will feed your baby for the very last time. They will fall asleep on you after a long day. And it will be the last time you ever hold your sleeping child. One day you will carry them on your hip and then set them down and never pick them up that way again. You will scrub their hair in the bath one night, and from that day on, they will want to bathe alone. You will hold their hand to cross the road. they will never reach for it again. One last time. When that happens, don't yearn for one last time. Smile that God gave you children to love in 3 stages of development. Compassion from the womb till they were born, grace to enjoy them, and delight when you gaze at them. And finally, when they're grown up and going their separate ways, pronounce shalom, peace on earth, peace at home, and goodwill towards men. Oh, it's so tempting to end the sermon here on a feel-good feeling, right? But I need to ask you, have we been good parents? Have you been a good parent? Or have you brought up the child to be an intellectual giant by an emotional dwarf? Emotional beings are somehow arrogant people and narcissists, full of themselves. They are a danger at work, at home, and in the church. In watching over your child, have you guarded the chastity, but not the mind and the heart, which is extremely deceptive? The mind, because it is prone to wander. Remember, if the mind is not captive to the mind of Christ, it must be captive to whoever it is in bed with. And in these last days, people will question their identity. So if you are teaching your child about identity, which one word from the Bible would you refer the child to? It's this Hebrew word called zelem, which means image. In Latin, it's called imago Dei, which is the image of God. How is the word zelem, image in Hebrew, derived from? It is derived from the word zel, which means shadow. A shadow is something that is created when a beam of light falls upon it. And according to the Bible, a human being is nothing less than the image of God. Because in many ways, human beings reflect the wondrous image of God's perfection and beauty. This is the Bible's way of saying, it doesn't matter who you are, what you have done, how long you have strayed away from church, or how low you are. You, me, every human being reflects God's image. Because in God's image, there is an irreducible worth and glory, and significance and value. The most fundamental aspect of our identity is that we are created in the image of God. And this image belongs to Him. Those who carry God's image belong to God. How is that possible? Every time you take a selfie, the image belongs to you. The image validates your existence. And having made man in His image, God said, not it was good, He said, tov me'od in Hebrew, which means it was very good. Very good. Because human beings validate God's image. So whenever we question our sexual identity, we question the identity of being made in the image of God. When we attack the image of God, it's the same as attacking God and His work, questioning whether He was wise to make man in His image and wise to make them male and female. The selfie you take is the image that belongs to you. You and I are made in God's image, which is why we belong to Him. We validate His existence. What's the takeaway today? It can be the parenting manual. God is so good. The Bible is so relevant. The Word is so useful. My friends, when you start reading the Bible for its relevance and usefulness, God becomes a God with benefits. We start to say God is God only because He's useful. This is a very, very anthropocentric way of preaching, held by many Christians, I'm afraid. So I want to end today by giving you a theocentric perspective. If you were God, and you have this blessing, where would you place it? Would it be in Genesis or in Revelation when it is finished? Why Numbers? And all the places, Numbers chapter 6. What is the intent? The intent of this blessing must first let people know who is giving the blessing. And we know from Numbers 6, the last verse, that it is the Lord who is giving the blessing. How do we know? It says, they shall put my name upon the people, and I will surely bless them. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, makes this self-evident. It was finished around the 3rd century BC. How do they make it self-evident? They take this last verse and put it before the blessing. The Septuagint is on your left. The English translation is on your right. We have the green blessing, the orange or red blessing, and the purple blessing. The 3 blessings. Where does Septuagint place the last verse? Before the blessings begin, on the gray words. So now we know who is the blessed, right? But why place the blessing in number 6? When was the book of Numbers written? The first chapter, first verse tells us this was the first day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year. So it was a year after they left Egypt. And what happened in the interim? There was this high priest called Aaron. He collected gold rings from the people while Moses was up talking to God at the top of Mount Sinai. And he said, I threw the rings into the fire and out came this golden calf. Wow, Aaron must be better than David Copperfield. Right? Now, this episode has passed. God says, before I give you the marching orders on how you should leave Mount Sinai and march into the wilderness, I want you, Aaron, the chief culprit who led Israel into idolatrous worship. I want you to tell the people, I'm a God of compassion. I forgive. And there's no better way to show you than to use you to tell the people, not only do I forgive, I also bless. So the Lord is saying in number 6, I present to you the forgiven high priest. His name is Aaron. And he will pronounce this blessing over you. Because I'm the Lord, a God who's merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in love and faithfulness. When you hear this blessing as an English-speaking reader, you cannot connect the word bless, barak, to the word berak, which means knee. What has blessing got to do with knee? But to the Jew who hears the word bless, he knows that when the Lord blesses, it's as if the Lord bends his knee. The same way as a mother would to pick up her child. God humbles himself. And he bends over to bless those he loves. But to bend your knee, God has to come down. How does love come down? 3 weeks ago, we heard that love came down a ladder at Bethel in Jacob's dream. Love came down another ladder in John 1, where Jesus called one of his disciples. You will see the ladder, an angel stepping on the Son of Man, going up and going down. The Son of Man is Jesus. Mothers also bend their knee. Jesus bends his knee in John 13 to wash all the smelly feet of all his disciples. Not only John, the beloved disciple who lay on his bosom. Not only Peter, the disciple with the biggest mouth in his foot. All the way down to Judas. Let's end with this last slide. The takeaway is, of course, the Lord's blueprint on parenting. It's all about showering your child with love, lots of it, in 3 different colors. With compassion, with grace, and with shalom. Remember to pray this priestly prayer over your child, and then leave them in God's faithful hands. But using this last slide, I want to ask you one last question. What else do you see in this parenting guide? Do you see God's character? In Exodus 24, where God proclaims, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, or in Hebrew, Adonai, Adonai, El Rahum Vehanun, where God is saying, I'm a God of compassion, I'm a God of grace. When you say this priestly prayer over your child, follow me. Parents like me. Parent with compassion and grace. Secondly, can you feel God's heartbeat? How do you feel a person's heartbeat? When the mother looks at the baby, she says to herself, there's nothing that the baby does that will make me love the baby less or more. And God says the same thing. I've loved you with an everlasting love. I cannot love you more, I cannot love you less than what I've always loved you. Not even when you turn prodigal, because I have the Father's heart. So may I invite all of us to stand as members of the royal priesthood to read this blessing. So you have practiced saying this blessing over your child when you go home. If the child is near you, beside you, place your right hand on your child. If your child is singing the choir, direct your hand in the direction of the choir where your child is. If there is no child near you, point your hand towards someone next to you or in front of you. Okay? Ready? Let's read. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord makes his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his face towards you and give you his peace. Now, don't sit down yet. Now you know how to pray this prayer over your child. Do you know how to receive this blessing? Very simple. The same way as you would receive an ang pao, with both hands. Those of you who don't like ang pao, put your hands in your pocket. or behind your back, or behind your head. Okay? So, open the palms of your hand to receive. And I will read to you this prayer in Hebrew and translate for you, so you understand the meaning, and we will end. Yevarheha Adonai Verishmeha. Yera Adonai Panav Eleha Vihuneha. Yisa Adonai Panav Eleha Vyasem Laha Shalom. Which means, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up His face towards you and give you His shalom. The shalom which can only come from the Sar Shalom, the Hebrew name for the Prince of Peace, whose name is Jesus. Jesus is our shalom. To God be the glory. Amen.